Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Emma Kurth, and I am one of the Child Care Center Licensing Training Specialists from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Today, I'm presenting Applying for Certification for Child Care Centers that qualify as licensed exempt, where I'm going to go over completing the application process. I hope to offer you some helpful information and connection to a variety of resources that have been developed through the state to support you as you start on this journey. Today, I am joined by our certification supervisor, Carrie Leith, and two certification licensors, Michelle Chapin and Michelle Lee, who will be here to answer any questions that come up in the chat. Our hope for today is to provide you with a great amount of information, introduce you to resources that have been developed, and to tell you how to contact us for whenever it is that you might need support throughout this process. We sincerely value what you do, and we want to see you succeed on this journey. So a few items of housekeeping during the presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available online likely in a few weeks once it's processed and posted. You should have received a handout via email yesterday. If not, you can reach out to that training email address and I will send it to you again. Call lines are muted, but your chat box is open. And so if you have a question, submit that question to everyone, as others might have the same or similar questions. And our panelists are available to help answer those questions through the chat box. If you send questions just to me, it's likely that I won't see it in time to get you a timely answer. Now we're going to quickly cover just an overview of what this presentation is meant to be and meant not to be. This presentation is an overview of the certification application process for childcare centers in Minnesota. I'm going to provide you with an insight into the requirements of becoming a certified center, information and resources about how to do that. And this presentation is designed to just be a place to connect with you and share that we're here to help you no matter where you are at in this process. It's also important to note what this presentation is not, and it is not a replacement for knowing and reviewing the statutes governing certified childcare in Minnesota. It doesn't replace or supersede the intent and content of those applicable regulations. It's also not a comprehensive list of information, meaning that it's not all inclusive of everything that you're going to need to know about opening a childcare center. It's not legal or business advice. And it's not advice on any activities or curriculum or quality above and beyond certification requirements. So let's dive in. Just a kind of a primer background on childcare certification. The 2014 Federal Child Care and Development Block Grant Reauthorization changed requirements for states and childcare providers accessing childcare subsidy funding. One of those new federal requirements from that reauthorization in 2014 was that all providers receiving childcare subsidy funds, so this would be like Minnesota's Child Care Assistance Program or CCAP, must meet health and safety requirements, such as background studies for their childcare staff, pediatric first aid and CPR training, and having annual monitoring visits. For Minnesota, that meant that our licensed exempt providers had to go through a process to show that they meet those specific minimum health and safety requirements outlined by the Federal Child Care Development Block Grant. And this is why Minnesota established child care certification. To learn more about that Federal Child Care Development Block Grant, there is a link where you can find more information on the federal rules, and that is here on this slide, and it's also in your handout for today's session. This visual is meant to help illustrate childcare, the variety of different kinds of childcare in Minnesota, and where certified childcare centers fit within the various types of care in Minnesota. Firstly, Minnesota law starts with requiring that all childcare provided needs to be licensed unless an exclusion is met. There are nearly 1,800 licensed childcare centers and over 6,000 licensed family childcare programs in Minnesota that are monitored for compliance with licensing statutes and rules. However, while the majority of childcare situations are required by law to be licensed, as I mentioned, there are several exclusions which allow programs to operate without a license, and those are listed in Minnesota Statute Section 142B.05. That 2014 reauthorization of the Federal Child Care and Development Block Grant Fund required states to become compliant with the federal requirement to ensure all child care receiving funding met those certain health and safety standards. And so during the 2017 legislative session, state legislators enacted changes to bring the state of Minnesota into compliance with those federal child care and development fund requirements. This includes licensed exempt centers that participate in Minnesota's Child Care Assistance Program becoming required to become certified under Minnesota Statutes Chapter 142C. If a licensed exempt center opts out of certification, they are not eligible to receive payments from child care assistance or things like Great Start compensation payments. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families Licensing Division is responsible for certifying and monitoring licensed exempt child care centers that participate in CCAP, and there are just under 600 certified centers. This slide lists licensure exclusions for program types that might consider being certified. This list can also be found on our Certified Centers webpage. It's a lot of text in a block, and I will pause here so you can peruse it for a moment. Certified childcare programs must comply with requirements found in Minnesota Statutes, Chapter 142C. And it's very important that you know where to find and look up the actual requirements that you're responsible for complying with as a certified childcare center. The Minnesota Office of the Reviser of Statutes publishes a book each year with current requirements for childcare. But even better, they have a really great searchable website that allows anyone to look up all current laws, statutes, and rules that apply to Minnesotans. Licensing and certification regulations can be searched on this site by entering the statute number or the rule number. For example, if you're wondering about staffing requirements for a certified center, you can search for 142C. It'll bring up the long list of different part numbers, and you would read down to staffing requirements, which is 142C.08. Be able to click right in there and read the text yourself and know exactly what it says. To learn more about certification, the Child Care Center Licensing Unit has a website devoted to certified centers, and it can be found by visiting the link here on this slide, which is also in several different places in your handout. The site contains information on how to contact us, requirements for certified centers, helpful forms and documents for you to download, guidance as far as what to expect for inspections, and a link to the application website. So why become certified? There are many benefits to certification. Being certified improves recognition of the program for families and the public as a program that is certified in compliance with health and safety standards. With that comes ongoing support from licensors who provide technical support on certification requirements, help with a variety of questions or connection to a variety of resources and information, yearly reviews for compliance that are announced and coordinated, and connection as needed year-round as things come up. Becoming certified allows your child care program to enroll as an eligible CCAP participating program, allowing for more equitable access to care for all children in Minnesota. In addition, certified programs have numerous grant opportunities and access to valuable resources that only certified or licensed programs are permitted to receive. The Great Start compensation support payment grants are available only to certified programs, not licensed exempt, just certified and licensed centers in family care. At last but certainly not least, becoming certified allows your program a seat at the decision-making table. There are many opportunities where the state seeks input from child care programs, and by being certified, you will receive those notifications on various opportunities for your voice to be heard and to provide valuable input that helps shape child care statewide. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Child Care Assistance Program. This is a state government program administered by local, county, or tribal governments. CCAP serves approximately 12,000 children from 22,000 families each month. CCAP provides financial assistance to help low-income families pay for childcare and helps parents pursue employment or education leading to employment. Certified childcare centers may participate to receive childcare assistance payments by registering for each county of residence of the families participating in CCAP. More information can be found on the DCYF Child Care Assistance Program website, and this link is included in your resource guide. CCAP pays providers either what they charge or the applicable CCAP maximum rates. CCAP maximum rates are the 75th percentile of what is called a market rate survey, which is a survey that collects information from as many childcare providers as possible. County, age category served, provider type, accreditation, whether you're parent aware rated, can also impact your maximum rates. We saw new rates go into effect in January 2025, and these rates are updated every 3 years. So the next time we'll see an update will be January 2028. There are some additional record-keeping requirements for providers who participate in the Child Care Assistance Program. In today's presentation, I will focus on just the attendance record-keeping requirements. The Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program also requires attendance record-keeping. Electronic attendance systems may be used to meet these requirements, and electronic attendance will be required in the future. Now let's talk quickly about the Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program. I know I've mentioned it quite a bit already. So this is a program that was signed into law in May of 2023, providing Minnesota with a permanent program designed to support the childcare industry and childcare educators. Compensation payment award amounts are determined by the number of full-time equivalent staff who regularly care for children in the program. 1 FTE, or full-time equivalent staff, equals 32 hours. And regularly cares for children is defined as a paid staff whose job description or responsibilities include interacting with, caring for, and supervising children enrolled in the program. You can see in the second bullet point here that payment calculations are equal to $375 per FTE, and each staff can be calculated up to 2 FTE, depending on how many hours are worked in that funding period. These payments also increase by 10% if providers receive Child Care Assistance Program funds or early learning scholarship payments during what's called a look-back period, or if they're located in a child care access equity area. Eligible certified child care centers are welcome to apply for the Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program. These payments are meant to increase early childhood educator compensation and benefits. For any questions, you'll be able to find, there's this contact information listed on the slide, and it is also in your resource guide as well. So before sitting down to apply to become certified, it's helpful to understand the process that comes along with applying for certification, as it can be more than simply filling out an application. The process to obtain certification is just that. It's a process with several different parts or phases. And the first step is preparing to apply. So gathering and ensuring you have all the items and information you need in advance will help your submission of the application go smoothly. Then in phase 1, this is where you're starting a new application, including uploading of your policies and procedures, your floor plan, your fire inspection if it's available, all of this into the Provider Hub. Phase 2, once a licensor approves your policies and procedures, you will then be prompted to enter staffing information. This phase includes final approval of all requirements, including background studies. And finally, certification. Certification is granted once all required items are approved, including a scheduled phone meeting with your licensor. After becoming certified, requirements are maintained, and certification reviews begin. And today we're going to talk through that process. Phase 1, initiating your application and getting started in the Provider Hub. A few years ago, during the legislative session, legislators funded a new streamlined electronic-based process to be developed for childcare programs to use. The Provider Hub launched for certified childcare programs in April of 2023 and for licensed childcare in November of 2023. It's planned to launch more licensed programs in the future. So with that, know that the Provider Hub continues to be enhanced and worked on and developed, and therefore us sharing today about the process that we're using today is still new, and things can change a bit as features become available and developed and released. So what I'm going to present to you today is the current standard as of now, and it's rather comprehensive. And so even if some things are enhanced, this presentation should at least give you the foundation of how to work within the Provider Hub experience. And there's more information about the Child Care Systems Transformation Initiative, which is where the Provider Hub came from, in your handout for today's session. So what exactly is the Provider Hub? It is an online tool to apply for and manage social services, licenses, and certifications, access funding, and participate in other government programs. This currently includes the Child Care Center certification process, provider registration for Child Care Systems Program, participation in the Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program, and the enrollment and attendance feature. The Provider Hub gives you a centralized online location to complete your applications and 24/7 self-service access to licensing and certification and other program information. All applications must be completed and submitted through the Provider Hub. On the Provider Hub public webpage, you'll find a link to the online tool to log in or to create an account. You'll find more information about current features in the Provider Hub and links to step-by-step instructions to help you use the online tool successfully. You'll also find links to past release notes, and these share details about various improvements that the team makes to the tool each month, and you'll find newsletters. And the link to the Provider Hub webpage itself can be found in your handout. You can search for articles within the Help and Resources section of the Provider Hub. Currently, the Provider Hub team knows that the search function within the Help and Resources page is not the most reliable, and they are working on improving it. It's a known challenge. So you can also check the resources section of the Provider Hub webpage. So not the online tool, but the website itself, for quick access to those same articles on the Provider Hub features. Things like certification, the CCAP process, Great Start compensation, and enrollment and attendance. The Provider Hub team has also created learning libraries, which collect all of the articles on a given topic in one place. And a great one for new users is the Provider Hub Basics Learning Library. This includes links to articles that can help you learn how to complete foundational kind of entry tasks into the online tool, like creating your account, logging in, resetting your password, preparing your files for upload into the tool, printing a certificate, and more. Find this learning library. You can find it in all 4 languages that Provider Hub puts things out in: English, Spanish, Hmong, and Somali, in the resource section of the Provider Hub webpage. Another learning library designed just for childcare centers applying for certification is the Certification Learning Library. This resource includes links to articles that can help you apply for and manage your certification. And you can find this learning library in the resources section of the Provider Hub webpage. The Product Success Team is a group of local experts that are here to help you find success with the Provider Hub. They can help with technical questions about the Provider Hub, including any issues registering for or accessing your account. To connect with them, you can either submit a case when you're logged into the online tool, or you can call them at the number here on the slide. Instructions on submitting a case in the Provider Hub are in that Basics Learning Library. It's titled Submit a Case to Get Help. The team responds to cases Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and their goal is to respond within 24 hours, but this can sometimes vary depending on how many cases they're receiving at a given time. And they'll match their follow-up with how you initially contacted them. So if you submitted a case online through the tool, you'll check your notifications and you'll get a notification from them that way. If you left a voicemail, they will call you back. When you click on the link to the Provider Hub from the Certified Center's webpage to begin your application for certification, you'll be asked if you want to create an account or if you have an existing account. If you do not have a current account associated with an existing program, you'll need to click on Create an Account. From there, applicants will enter their first and last name, email address, and their preferred language to be used while using the Provider Hub. If you already have an account associated with a different program, you'll sign in with your existing account sign-in information. And again, if you need support with this from the Provider Hub, you can contact that product success team. All right, so then you're going to begin your application. You can see the red box here. You will click for Certified Center. The other box, what you see is Licensed Child Care Center. And one thing to note here is that they've recently updated the pages, and so you won't see that Department of Human Services logo anymore. It's been updated to State of Minnesota branding. So when you go there, if it looks slightly different, know that you are still on the right track. It's just gone through kind of a makeover. Once you've set up your account in the Provider Hub, you're going to choose to begin an application for certified. And the first step is called the application criteria step. And this is where in the Provider Hub, you'll be asked to designate the application criteria by identifying which exemption from licensure that your center meets. And just as a reminder, all childcare in Minnesota must be licensed unless the program is meeting an exception to licensure. A program that is exempt from licensure under Section 142B.05 Subdivision 2 must be a certified licensed exempt childcare center according to this section in order to receive that childcare assistance payment program under Chapter 119B. Exclusions will be verified by support staff, and if you have questions about meeting an exclusion, reach out to a licensor on call for more information. In certification, the center operator, we're going to go through some definitions of titles that you will see in relation to certification. So in certification, the center operator is generally the one who completes the application and identifies who the authorized agent, or shorthand, this is called the AA, is for the certification holder. For example, the school district or the program organization. The authorized agent gets access after certification is granted. So let's go through the rest of these role definitions. That'll be helpful for you to understand what some of the differences are between titles. So the certification holder, again, this is the organization name that's legally responsible for the operation of the center and is granted certification by the commissioner. Then you have the authorized agent. The authorized agent is the individual that will communicate with DCYF on all matters relating to the certification. Authorized agents have full access to functions in the Provider Hub, and this is the person who assigns others to roles within the hub. The authorized agent will designate who will be what's called the sensitive information person to handle sensitive private information from background studies and to initiate studies for background study subjects in Net Study 2.0. This is the individual who will be contacted by background studies to designate an individual to do these kind of roles. So this is the person who would get that contact. If your certified program is affiliated with a licensed program, the authorized agent at the certified program needs to be the same person as the licensed program. The authorized agent is not typically a center operator, but sometimes they can be. Center operator is the person exercising supervision or control over the center's operations, plannings, and functioning. Typically, the person completing the application identifies who the authorized agent is for the organization. Could be this. This is the person that licensors reach out to when they're scheduling annual reviews. So this is going to be a main point of contact between the program and their licensor. Center name. This is the name of the child care center. If there is more than one center, the naming convention should be center specific so that you know and DCYF and your licensor will know exactly which location is being referenced by the name. Director. The person that meets certification requirements for a director from statute and must assign a designee in their absence during operating hours. There is an opportunity to designate a director and give delegated authority within the hub, but that will occur after certification is granted, so not during the application period. Center operators will submit application information and then could designate a director later. This is like a site lead or a lead teacher for the program or the location. So to give some examples, the center operator could be the school age care coordinator, and the authorized agent could be the community education director, or the center operator is a supervisor of the program, and the authorized agent is the director of the organization. In some instances, the center operator is the authorized agent. All of this depends on the size and the structure of the program. And with regards to school districts, parks and recs, YMCAs, programs of those styles, in school districts, the authorized agent should be the same as what's listed with the Minnesota Department of Education. For functionality in the provider hub, if there are certified and licensed programs within the organization, the authorized agent should be that same person again. This is a part that can get a little bit complicated. So this chart shows the various levels of access to functions in the provider hub based on role type. Authorized agents are able to view information in the hub, create new users, or edit user access, submit a new application, draft a change request, approve a change submission, update or add program information and personnel, and close a program. The authorized agent needs to grant delegated authority to the center operator unless the center operator is the one who started the first application for the certification holder. If that's the case, then that center operator automatically has the authority to complete the entire application process and names the authorized agent. In this case, the authorized agent does not submit or approve the submission. Center operators always have the same authority as delegated authorities once named by the authorized agent or when that person starts an application as just described. Delegated authorities can view information in the provider hub, draft a change request, approve a change for submission, and update or add program information and personnel information. The create submit level of access can view information in the hub, draft a change request, and update or add program information and personnel. Read-only access is just that. That style of user can only see information in the provider hub, but is not allowed to make any changes or submission. And you can find even more information about how these different role types work and work within the hub in the learning library in the provider hub in an article called User Access Levels. The certification holder is the organization name that's legally responsible for the operation of the center and granted certification by the commissioner. as we said on the previous slide. For example, Community Action Partnership of Ramsey and Washington Counties. That could be a certification holder. Tri-Valley Opportunity Council, Minnesota Valley Action Council, etc. These types of larger scale organization names, the ones with the legal responsibility for the program. Exclusions from licensures, as you're submitting your application, you'll pick which one you meet, and that will be verified by support staff when the application is being processed. And while you do not need to submit ownership documentation, as it's not required in 142C, the area to upload it is available, but you can bypass this and move forward without uploading. And you can see that section on the slide. If you are going to upload ownership documentation, there are a couple different types. There's government entities, and this would be a letter signed by the manager, administrator, or other executive of the government entity authorizing the submission of the license application. For organizations, you would submit a copy of your most recent Minnesota Secretary of State filing of the business's legal name, the documents that created the organization, and identify the individuals who make decisions about the operation of the program, such as a partnership agreement, articles of organization, articles of incorporation, bylaws, or an operating agreement. And for individuals, you would submit documentation of your business's legal name as filed with the Minnesota Secretary of State. Step 3, this is the step in the process where you will identify and complete contact information for the authorized agent and the center operator roles. When entering someone's name, enter their full legal name so that it matches their legal identification and will align with all systems, such as a background study in Net Study 2.0. And it's very important to make sure that it is their full legal name matching their identification, or it can really slow up the process. After you have identified the authorized agent and the center operator, you will click Next into step 4 and be brought to this screen where you are asked to upload your policies and procedures. When you develop your policies and procedures, it's critical to follow the guidelines for developing policies and procedures for certified centers. This is a form that we've created to ensure that all required policies and procedures are created to meet all of the requirements in statute. Each policy is uploaded separately within its own unique title, rather than one document of all policies uploaded multiple times. At this point in the process, the policies and procedures you upload would be those that would apply to all of the programs that you're applying for. Later in the process, you will have the opportunity to upload additional policies and procedures that are going to be site-specific, such as individual site risk reduction plans and emergency preparedness plans. Once program policies are submitted, the policies will be reviewed by DCYF to either approve or send back for more edits. Sometimes content is missing, specific language is missing, and it will be sent back. If it's sent back, the policy will need to be revised and re-uploaded into the hub for DCYF to review again. Reporting requirements. Certified centers must comply with the reporting requirements for abuse and neglect as specified in Minnesota Statutes Chapter 260E, the Reporting of Maltreatment of Minors Act. And they must upload their policy that matches the reporting policy requirements. A person mandated to report physical or sexual child abuse or neglect occurring within a certified center must report the information to DCYF, and certified centers must have written policies for staff to comply with reporting requirements. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families, Individuals and Families Report Abuse webpage has additional information on reporting abuse in a child care center. Certified centers must have a policy on reporting that includes informing DCYF within 24 hours of the death of a child in care at the program and within 24 hours of any injury to a child in the certified center that requires treatment by a physician. And a physician also includes a dentist. A serious injury is defined as an injury to a child requiring treatment by physician or advanced practice registered nurse. And if the child goes to a doctor but does not require treatment, this would not be considered a serious injury. So only if treatment is provided. Certified centers must use the DCYF Child Care and Serious Injury Death Report form. And note that Internet Explorer or Edge are the preferred browser types to use with this form, and that it is best to download the forms to your desktop, and open from there. Otherwise, sometimes, no matter the browser type, the send buttons don't always work. So download forms right to your desktop and save. Step 5, number of programs. The center operator must input the number of programs applying for certification. And programs are defined as individual centers or site locations. Only choose multiple programs if the certification holder oversees multiple locations. Step 6, attestations. Next, the Provider Hub will ask you to acknowledge each attestation statement by clicking each box as shown here on the screen. So you'll read through, you'll click each box, and it won't let you go through until you clicked each one. Then it gives you the option to proceed. And another note on attestations, applicants are agreeing to the following statements when they apply for certification: that the center operator will receive a written notice from the DCYF licensing division identifying any documents that are missing or deficient, meaning that they've been submitted but aren't quite meeting requirements. And they will be given 45 days to resubmit those documents that are what's called substantially incomplete, which can seem like a scary title, but it just means that something about it is missing or not quite up to the requirements. Failure to submit those substantially complete documents within 45 days from notice could be a basis for a certification denial. You're also agreeing to the person designated as the authorized agent will receive an email from DCYF and will be required to create a NetStudy 2.0 account for submitting background study requests. Applicants must be compliant with all applicable laws and statutory requirements, or certification will not be issued. Certification is not transferable to any other person or organization, and that any future owners of the business must apply for a new certification number. The information provided on the application is true, accurate, and complete. If the Commissioner of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families grants certification, they must comply with the requirements contained in Minnesota Statutes Chapter 142C and all applicable laws at all times during the terms of certification. The documentation and inspections required by statutes are necessary for the Commissioner to determine whether Minnesota laws are being complied with, so you must keep that required documentation and allow for inspections. And the Commissioner may issue a correction order or decertify a center if an applicant or certification holder fails to comply with the applicable laws or knowingly withholds relevant information from or gives false or misleading information to the Commissioner in connection with an application for certification or during an investigation. And now we're going to talk about some of those site-specific steps that I mentioned before to continue on with your application. After you agree to the attestations on the previous page, you'll be directed to a page where each site or your sites are listed, and you'll be asked to then complete the application for each site. The Continue Application button is there for each program, and it must be completed. Identifying information for each program must be entered. This is the screenshot of the Provider Hub for the process that I just talked about on the previous slide for entering site-specific information. So what name is used for the program will be pulled from here into other data systems and used to designate that site. So it'll be used for things like Net Study 2.0, CCAP, Parent Aware, Great Start, things like that. You will now be in the draft phase for the location or locations. So you'll click on Continue Application for the first location. If applying for multiple locations, each location will need to be entered separately. Enter the program name, the address of the physical location of that program, and select the age categories served by the program. This slide shows the ages for each age category and the maximum group size and staff to child ratios that you would see for infant, toddler, preschool, and school age. Kindergarten includes a child of sufficient age to have attended the first day of kindergarten or who is eligible to enter kindergarten within the next 4 months. Certified centers may serve a child that is 14 years old if either the child remains eligible for the Child Care Assistance Program or if the center serves only school-age children in a setting that has students enrolled in no grade higher than 8th grade. If middle school-age children are enrolled and combined with elementary children, the risk reduction plan must include policies and procedures to ensure adequate supervision when children are grouped together. Maximum group size is the maximum number of children that can be involved in a group activity at one time. And the maximum group size applies at all times except during group activity coordination time not exceeding 15 minutes. So if it's under 15 minutes, during a meal, outdoor activity, field trip, nap and rest time, or during a special activity, including things like a movie, a guest speaker, indoor large muscle activity, or a holiday program. Maximum group size applies to instances where all children are participating in one activity. This would not include having more than the maximum group size in a space participating in different activities. For example, if 90 school-age children could be in one cafeteria space, they could do so as long as they're participating in something like 3 or more separate activities spread across that space. Moving on to operating hours. You will enter the operating hours for the program, including the operating schedule and the daily schedule for this particular program. If the schedule is different during different parts of the year, such as during the summer versus the fall or winter, you will add a section to complete for that time frame. Schedules will need to be entered for the hours the program will serve children. If the program will have a separate schedule during summer or during holidays, those changes need to be entered with start and end dates. Applicants will need to indicate the time period that the schedule is effective for and the hours that the program will operate. If the program will have the same schedule year-round, no differences, the end date should be left blank. It's important to note that schedules may not overlap. This is a screenshot of the Provider Hub, and you can see the arrow pointing to the box that you can select if you are using the document you previously uploaded earlier on in the application process. So if you're going to use something similar to what you already uploaded for this section, you would click this button. You'll see near the end of the list, there are 2 policies that must be uploaded that were not included in the earlier step, however. And these are the ones that we talked about being site-specific. So for each site in application, you will need to create different risk reduction plans and different emergency preparedness plans because these need to be specific to each site. Each building is going to be a little bit different, and so that requires that your risk reduction plan be reflective of each individual space that you're using. So these will be developed to contain those details that are specific and unique to each of your sites. Continuing on in site-specific policies, the policies on the left side of this slide may have been uploaded in the previous steps of the application process. So that is your exclusion of sick children, immunization policy, administration of meds, those things that could be the same from site to site. If providers choose to use that same policy that's already been uploaded, there's that option that we saw on that last slide to check the box to use that previously submitted policy. But there's not an option to use this feature for the emergency preparedness plan or the risk reduction plan. You're going to have to go in and upload each specific policy for those two. Staff cannot be trained on policies until after those policies and procedures have been approved by the licensor. So you won't want to do any training on your policies until your licensor has given you the green light to go ahead and do that. And if you do train on them before you get that green light from your licensor, if the licensor comes and says something's missing, you're going to have to retrain all over again once things are officially approved. So best to just wait until you get that go ahead. A little bit more detail about the emergency preparedness and the risk reduction plans. Again, certified centers must have a policy for emergency preparedness and response, and this is using the Child Care Emergency Plan form that we've created. This form is required, and it must be specific again to each individualized certified center, and it's so important to make sure that you know that each one needs to be different and unique to your specific situations and scenarios in that site. It's also required that staff are trained at their orientation and then at least once each calendar year on those center-specific plans. Minnesota Statute 142C.13, Subdivision 2, requires that the certified center must conduct at least quarterly one evacuation drill and one shelter-in-place drill. And the date and time of the drills must be documented. So that's part of that documentation that you're going to need to keep. An evacuation drill and a shelter-in-place drill, this could be something like tornado drill or a lockdown drill. You're going to do those each quarter. It must be during the operation times of your certified center. And generally the 4 quarters break down as fall, which is seen as September, October, November, winter quarter, December, January, February, spring quarter, March, April, May, and summer quarter, June, July, August. Moving on into facility information. During this step, you are asked to upload a floor plan of the facility outlining the space used for childcare both indoors and outdoors. In addition, a certified program must provide documentation showing that a state fire marshal fire inspection was completed within the previous 3 years. And it's important to note that DCYF no longer accepts school fire reports or inspections to meet this requirement. Both documents will need to be uploaded when you're at this point in the application process, unless you check the box stating that you do not have a current fire inspection. If you click the box stating that the program does not have a current fire inspection and you submit the application, your program will not become certified until you can provide a current fire inspection. And if you designate that your site needs a fire inspection, once everything is submitted, your DCYF licensor working with your application will initiate a fire inspection to be completed by the state fire marshal. And that'll be once you've completed your application and submitted. So what are the steps that happen if you need a fire inspection? I know this is a dense slide, so we're going to review it. Once submitted, the licensor will email the provider the state fire marshal owner's permission to inspect form. And the provider will email that form back to the licensor once they've completed it. Then the licensor will complete what's called the interagency request for fire inspection form. The licensor will then email both the state fire marshal's owner's permission form to inspect and the interagency request form to the state fire marshal's office. Then at that point, a state fire marshal reaches out to the provider to set up a time to inspect the childcare spaces. Then the state fire marshal will send the report of whatever was found in the inspection to the provider, and the provider must complete any violations as the report says. Then the provider will upload that completed fire inspection form into the hub. If you do need an inspection, the state fire marshal has created a resource to help applicants determine what kind of fire sprinkler system or alarm system, what kind of exiting requirements they're required to have for their center based on their occupancy classification. It's a really helpful chart. You just plug in your numbers and it tells you what you need to do. And the link to that is in your handout. You are now at the step where you can either choose next to return to your application summary or choose previous to review the information that you just entered for that particular site you are submitting for. If you're applying for certification at more than one site, you'll head back to the application summary where you can then move on to the next site and enter that same type of specific information for your next site. On this slide, you can see the example here shows that this person is applying for certification for 3 different programs. Since they have designated these 3 different programs, until all information is entered for all 3 of the programs, they won't be able to go forward and submit the application. They'll have to keep going back until all 3 have been completed. Once all of that site-specific information has been entered, and each location shows view application, and you can see the green check mark next to it. Once that's done, you can hit the submit button to complete this stage of information. Once the application has been submitted, you can then watch your homepage for any status updates. Additionally, the indicated authorized agent will receive emails as the application moves through the process. So this is an example here on the slide of the homepage that shows some of what you might see. And these are not actual locations or programs. This screenshot was taken from our training provider hub, but you can it kind of gives you a sense of what your homepage might look as you're waiting. At this point, as an applicant, you now watch for correspondence back from DCYF in the Provider Hub and via email. Providers will receive an email notification when action is required from them on their application. And this means that DCYF might need additional information or clarification to move the application forward to the next phase of the process. And here is an example of what that might look like. You can see action is required to continue processing. You would see your program number, and then any other relevant information as well. If either something was missing or needs clarification, or if it all looks good upon initial review, you're going to receive a notification that you're ready for that next phase. We are going to pause here for a 10-minute break before we jump into phase 2, which is staffing requirements for certification. So I will see you back here at 10:04, so about 10 minutes. See you soon. All right, everybody, welcome back. And we are going to dive back into it with staffing requirements for certification. So we'll start out with staff qualifications. Certification cannot be granted until a program has at least a director hired and entered into the provider hub. The director must be 18 years of age or older and have completed at least 16 hours of training in any of the following topic areas: child development and learning, developmentally appropriate learning experiences, relationships with families, assessment, evaluation and individualization, historical and contemporary development of early childhood education, professionalism, and health and safety and nutrition. Certified centers must have a director. If the director is not on site, they must have a designee in their place. And the designee does not need to meet the requirements of a director, but they must know that they are assigned as the designee. So they have to know it's that's in charge if the director is not on site. And a designee must be named whenever the director is not at the program. Any staff must be at least 16 years of age or older. There are additional training requirements for staff before direct contact with children that can occur that we will discuss later in the presentation. To comply with federal requirements, Minnesota Statute 142C specifies what needs to be kept in personnel records. And you can see that here on the slide. And these requirements include each staff person's role, name, home address, telephone number, and their date of birth. There must be documentation of completed trainings specified in Minnesota Statute Section 142C.12. There must be documentation of the date the program initiated a background study for that staff person. And there must be documentation of the date the staff person had direct contact or access to a child while supervised, as well as the date the staff person first had direct contact and access to a child while not supervised, so on their own. Currently, the feature to enter the address and phone number into the provider hub for staff is still being developed. Therefore, the licensor will reach out to ask for that information via email. And for this reason, you must also maintain personnel record information on site. Another thing to note is when you enter someone's name into the provider hub, you should be sure to enter that person's legal name that matches their legal identification. So their driver's license or their passport, something like that level of legal ID. And this is so that it will match and be verified against their background study, which is going to be in their legal name. So in the provider hub, you will now begin to enter personnel information for each employee, starting with the director. And again, the information must also be maintained in each director personnel file on site. During the hours of operation, a certified center must have that director again or their designee on site who's responsible for overseeing the implementation of written policies related to the management and control of the daily activities of the program, ensuring the health and safety of program participants, and supervising staff and volunteers on site. After contact information is entered, you will begin entering training information that meets the required topics for a director. There's an add button that allows you to add additional lines for more training. Next, you'll add information for each of your personnel. So you'll click that button that you see circled in red, Add Personnel, and you'll start adding their details. This screenshot shows a depiction of what you might expect it to look like in the provider hub, with fields to enter identifying information for each staff, volunteer, program support staff, driver, site contact, CCAP payment contact, and anyone else affiliated that might be required to be entered here. Based on the role chosen on the screen for each person, you'll then enter additional information in the various fields. That blue Add Personnel button on the bottom saves your information and brings back the list of personnel where you can continue to add people. And once you're all done adding your personnel, then you'll hit the next button. There's also a search feature available to see if staff are already connected with your organization. On this slide, we actually have two different screenshots. So there's the one on the top with the arrow that shows you the next button. And then there's a second one on the bottom with the large circle showing where you're at in the process. That top one shows you the button that you're going to push to bring you to the page that's then shown in the bottom screenshot. So when you hit the next button, you return to the application summary, and once you hit submit in the bottom left, the application gets sent to the licensor for review. If there's more action needed, something missing or something needing correction, that's when you'll receive that bell notification and an email notification. Like we talked about before, sometimes something will kick back that language is missing or some detail is missing and needing to be corrected. When you receive that email notification, there should also be a more detailed letter in the hub that's offering more detail and telling you exactly what's missing, what you need to be doing. Once everything is approved that's been submitted in the hub, before becoming certified, your licensor will set up a phone call meeting to go over everything about certification with the center operator. And the center operator will then be notified when certification is granted. Now we are going to talk a little bit about the background study process. State law requires background studies for individuals who are employed by the Child Care Center and individuals who provide direct contact services or have access to the children. The background study determines whether a person has any disqualifying characteristic which could prevent that person from being in certain jobs or positions. For guidance, applicants can use our resource titled Certified Child Care Centers Background Study Worksheets. Who needs a background study? This is in the handout, and it's really helpful to help you walk through the various positions and determine what type of background screen is needed for who and who needs what. Once your application is received, it gets sent to our licensing unit support staff who do an initial review to make certain identifying information is properly submitted. Once verified, an email from the address is here on the screen as well. It's the bottom bullet, dhs.netstudy2@statemn.us is sent to the designated authorized agent of the program who will receive an email explaining the next steps in the background study process on how to begin initiating studies in the system. This email contains login and password information for that NetStudy 2.0 system. The authorized agent will designate, again, what's called a sensitive information person, or the SIP, and this is the individual who will have access to sensitive information in the background study webpage, NetStudy 2.0. The SIP should begin background studies on controlling individuals as soon as an account in NetStudy 2.0 is available, because some studies take longer than others to complete. So for example, for individuals who have lived in other states than Minnesota in the last 5 years, we might need additional paperwork from those states, and the process can really take some time. So starting those background studies as soon as you can is best practice. DHS Background Studies has extensive information on their website to offer more context and clarity and instruction. They even have an FAQ page that covers various common questions, and this website is linked in your handout as well. It's important to ensure that the authorized agent email address is accurate, as this is where that level of contact is going to be coming to. If an email is not received by the authorized agent soon after the application is submitted, make sure that you are checking your junk or spam folders for that email from dhs.netstudy2@state.mn.us. That's how you're going to be able to access and create that NetStudy account. And NetStudy 2.0 is that web-based application that allows you to get in and initiate and manage those background study requests and notifications. Now we will do a quick cover of the steps in the background study process. The type of background study that people associated with child care centers complete are unique due to the specific federal requirements and laws that dictate these. The studies required for childcare are referred to as enhanced studies, and they require fingerprints. And the department began implementing enhanced background studies in 2018 for all licensed childcare programs, certified licensed exempt centers, and non-licensed providers participating in CCAP. Again, these enhanced background studies are required by federal law, and Minnesota stays in compliance by requiring that centers complete these same studies. The steps illustrated on this slide come from our DHS partners from the Background Study Division, and they have been developed to help people understand the process. So you can see it's quite involved and sometimes can take some time to get everyone through and get their studies done and cleared. So starting as soon as you can access that account, really is best practice to keep things on track. Because our licensors also work closely with programs as they begin to learn this background study process and go through it for the first time, we have put together some helpful background study tips for you to be aware of. You can see them here on the slide. When you enter the study subject name into NetStudy 2.0, you're going to make sure that you are including any type of middle name or an initial exactly as it's appearing on that person's photo ID. Because if the ID does not match the documentation that's submitted, that person might be refused for fingerprinting services. You might have to go through that process again and resubmit. So everything, names all need to match the whatever form of government ID they're using. An individual's social security number is not required to be provided. However, if the study subject does include it when they fill out the information, it may allow the study to be transferable to another childcare program without paying for another study for 5 years. You will want to encourage study subjects, also your staff, to get their fingerprints and photos scheduled and scanned within the time frame that's given. Because if the fingerprinting window expires before they are able to get that photo taken and their fingerprint scanned, you may end up having to reinitiate and redo another study to open another window where they would go in and get their fingerprints scanned. Identigo by IDEMIA is the DHS fingerprint vendor with sites that are expanding across the state, and they also offer an FAQ webpage, which is included in your handout. Now we are going to move on to staff training. All staff must complete pediatric first aid and CPR training before having unsupervised direct contact with children and within 90 days of employment. This training must be repeated every 2 years thereafter. So staff have to have this before being allowed to work with children on their own without supervision from another staff member. And then it's that double part that sometimes can trip people up, where you have to have it done before unsupervised contact, and then also it needs to be done within 90 days. So both parts are true, and that can be a little tricky sometimes. Moving on to orientation. Directors and all staff must complete an orientation within 14 days after their first direct contact with children. So after their first day working with children, they must have orientation done within that 14-day window. It must cover health and safety policies that include things like sick children, immunizations, medications, allergies, hazards, transportation. And when you are in that application phase, again, this type of training should be done after your licensor has given you the go-ahead, that all of your policies have been approved and that you're good to go ahead and train on them. And then staff must be supervised by a staff person who has completed all of these trainings until their orientation is completed. So until they've completed this full list of trainings for their orientation, they must always be supervised by another staff person who has a completed orientation. Sudden unexpected infant death training must occur prior to caring for infants under age 1, if that's applicable for your program. And abusive head trauma training must occur prior to caring for children under school age, again, if applicable to your program. And child development and learning training must occur prior to any unsupervised direct contact with a child and within 90 days of that first direct contact with a child. So again, child development and learning is another one of those two-parters. It must happen before your staff can be allowed to have unsupervised contact, and it must also be done within that first 90 days of their contact with children. Moving on to yearly in-service requirements. So the director and each staff person must complete at least 6 hours of training each calendar year. And staff must be trained on the following, on what you see on this slide here: maltreatment of minors and reporting policies, health and safety policies, the risk reduction plan, behavior guidance, supervision, child development, sudden unexpected infant death, if applicable, and abusive head trauma, if applicable to your program types, and the emergency preparedness plan. And again, that will be that site-specific emergency preparedness plan, specific to whichever location it is that they are working in. All of this training must be documented. And DCYF has a form that it's on the certification page where you can track all of this right in the form, and it helps you stay organized. You tuck it right into your personnel folder, and it's there when your licensor needs it. And then moving on to our final batch. So you're certified. What comes next? Once certified, certified centers will have a certification review once a year. These reviews are coordinated and scheduled, and the licensor will communicate with the center operator to schedule that review. Licensing does determine a time frame for when the review will take place. For example, a licensor will call the center operator and say, I'm planning to come and conduct your annual review in September. What days is your program closed? And then they'll try to work with you around that schedule to set something up. Also, to note, certified licensors do also conduct investigations for certified allegations, and a certified licensor might show up unannounced for an investigation. Or based on the type of seriousness of the allegation, you could also see an investigator from the DCYF intake and investigation units. And again, that type of visit would be unannounced. They would just show up to observe your program. Record keeping requirements. The certified center is required to maintain a personnel record for each staff person. And like we discussed when you were initially building these in the application phase, these records must maintain the person's name, home address, telephone number, and their date of birth, the documentation that they completed all those required trainings, documentation of the date that the program initiated their background study for the staff person, and again, documentation of the date that that staff person first had direct contact and access to a child while supervised, as well as the date that they had direct contact and access to a child while unsupervised. And now that we have gone through that training section, you can see that why those two dates are critical to record both of them, because so many trainings are tied with that two-part of supervised and unsupervised. And that without that documentation, your licensor has no way to verify whether it's been done or not. The annual inspections of certain centers are scheduled with the center operator prior to the announced visit, and personnel records must be entered into the provider hub for all staff persons. Moving on to the second part of this slide, children's records must include the documentation that you see here on this slide, and it must be accessible to the licensor when asked for. So it must have proof of immunizations, medication authorization, and known allergies, if applicable, the full name of the child, their birth date, their home address. their parent or guardian's names and phone numbers, the emergency contact name and phone number, and this must be separate than a parent or guardian. So it has to be a separate group of people for the emergency contacts. Authorized pickups, their names and phone numbers, and all of that must be maintained in their file. Another important piece of certification is evacuation and shelter-in-place drills. Minnesota Statutes 142C.13 subdivision 2 requires that the certified center must conduct those quarterly evacuation drill and shelter-in-place drill, as we talked about way back towards the beginning of the presentation. And the date and the time of those drills must be documented and ready for review by your licensor. The evacuation drill and the shelter-in-place drill are done each quarter, and DCYF has created what's called a drill log for certified centers. It's not required, but it is a really handy way to just print out the drill log, write down the dates that you're doing it, and know that you're going to have that documentation ready for your licensor. You can find that on the certified website. Once certification is granted, any changes for your program must be requested in the Provider Hub before they're granted. If certified programs need to change the program name, the location, the age categories served, the days or hours of operation, or update the status of certification, the authorized agent will select the change being requested within the Provider Hub. And you can see a little screen grab of that here on the slide where it says select changes, and then you're going to go in and say you changed your program name, you're going to update program name and go through and make those kinds of requests. If the change being requested is regarding a change in the program location, whether the change is to a new location or maybe a new space within the same location, or to a newly constructed space within the same building that the program's going to be moving to, this needs to be indicated. Once the change request has been approved or denied by the licensor, or if more information is required, you will see that notification in the Provider Hub. The information that you provide to DCYF about your program must be accurate and it must be kept up to date. So upon implementation of the Provider Licensing and Reporting Hub, certification holders must enter and update that information in the hub as it may change. Another change we often see in certified programs are changes related to operating hours. So many centers experience seasonal changes during transition from school year to summer. And again, all changes will require a change request submitted within the Provider Hub for approval from your licensor. And again, you can find instructions on how to submit a change request in that Help and Resources tab within the Provider Hub itself or on the Provider Hub website. And if you have multiple locations, change requests must be submitted for each center. You'd be required to submit a floor plan, fire inspection, updated risk reduction plan, and emergency preparedness plan. Moving quickly into legislative news and how to find updates. Establishing the Department of Children, Youth, and Families has been a transformational change in how state government can work, with children and families focused at the center of it. Centering children, youth, and families in state government, Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan created this new agency that we, as a licensing unit, moved over to in June of last year that reimagine state government structures to elevate children, youth, and family priorities and funding needs by providing that level of focused leadership in the executive branch and within the legislature. You can get updates from the department through GovDelivery email updates that will automatically go to the authorized agent and the center operator for certified centers. But for anyone else who's interested, you can go sign up on the listserv. I believe there's a link to the listserv in your handout as well to get that level of GovDelivery update on the agency and the licensing unit and the goings on here. As a reminder on the Provider Hub support, Anytime that you need support with the Provider Hub, there are several ways to find assistance. And Provider Hub is so critical to your application phase that it's really important to know how to find help when you need it. So that product support hotline can be reached by phone or by email. The content is here on the slide. It's in your handout as well, and it's also on their website as well. And this is how you can contact us here in the licensing unit. So for any application or licensing requirement questions, there is what's called a licensor on call, available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30. You can call them at the number here on the screen, or you can email them at the number at the email on the screen. And somebody tries to answer your question either the day of your call or email or by the next day, depending on what time you're reaching out. If you have any training related questions, anything like that, you can contact me here at this email, the licensing training email. Reach out with any of your questions on that. We are here, we want to support you, and we want to help you accomplish this task. That is all we have for you today. Thank you for attending, and we will see you soon.